I am here at an 11-unit short-term rental resort that did $1.4 million 2 years ago, $1.5 million in revenue last year, and is on track to do $1.6 million in revenue this upcoming year in 2024. The resort is consisted of tree houses just like this, geodesic domes, container homes, safari tents, and many, many other structures. This resort is absolutely incredible. On today's episode, we're gonna sit down and talk to Ben Wolff, founder and CEO, about how he bought his land, chose his structures, did permitting, his dream team, his cleaners, his handyman, and much, much more. I am so excited to share everything about Stay Onera, Fredericksburg. This is Experiential Travel.
Looking at me with a smile like you wanted me. Saying, boy, come on, will our break be gone? I just had to try. You just move, baby. The way you move is moving me.
Welcome back to another episode of the Experiential Travel Podcast. Ben, this is our first episode we've ever done in real life, and I couldn't imagine a better guest to have in real life than you, man.
Well, I'm honored that you guys came out, experienced Onera, and now we're going to talk about it.
It's amazing seeing the photos and videos online and then being able to actually experience it in real life. That's pretty remarkable.
Hopefully it lived up to the hype.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done one episode before, and we've talked about kind of your story, the 9 steps of starting a short-term rental in this space of choosing your market, finding land, all of that great stuff. In this podcast, I really want to dive deeper into more nitty-gritty questions. These podcast episodes are really for people that want to start what you have and what we have, and maybe are in structure 2, 3, or 4, or maybe they don't even have land yet and they're wanting to start. So I want to talk about some tactical steps that we can chat about and go through, but I also want to go into your story as well and fill in the holes that we didn't talk about in the last episode.
Sounds good.
I want to talk about what we went through and our experience. And I first want to start off with the difference between traditional hotels and this kind of new age resort style, from not only the check-in, but through the whole experience. How have you pivoted your resort / Onera in general to this kind of new age resort style?
Our guiding light is delivering the best possible experience for the modern traveler. That's what we do at Oasi and Onera. And the modern traveler wants memorable experiences. They want shareability. They want to connect with a property, with the founder, with the origin story of how it came to be. And I think that a lot of those things are very counter to what the big brand hotels are doing. And then another big one that I left out is they want to collaborate with the founder, with the brand. And they don't want it to feel like a transaction, right? There's nothing less sexy than a transactional relationship. And the big brands, like everything's transactional, right? From the moment that you walk into the lobby and you're waiting online to get your room key and somebody asks you how your trip was because they're paid to do so and they don't care, right? That's a transactional experience. You know, housekeeping coming by and saying like, you know, housekeeping, can we enter? Like that feels transactional, right? And all the way to the biggest innovation in hotels in probably 50 years, loyalty rewards points. You know, if you stay at my hotel more and you spend more, I'm going to treat you better. I'm going to reward you. It's like, why not just treat everybody that way? Why not, try to have this special, customer experience for everybody and not just for those people that have, are business travelers and happen to stay in hotels, 200 days a year. So I think that's a shift. And when you talk to these, let's say you hear from these CEOs or, people at these big brand hotels, it's clear that, yeah, their customer is the guest, but their customer is also the owner of the hotel, right? They're a flagged hotel. They're a franchisee. And, a lot of those owners aren't necessarily thinking relentlessly customer focused. How do we make the experience as good as possible for the customer? And because of that, some of that gets lost in the shuffle. So we're just trying to, drill down on that, be as customer focused as possible and deliver the best experience we can to the modern traveler. So when you come to Onera, you're not going to a front desk, right? You can immediately go to your unit. You're connecting to your loved one. You're, in nature, you're getting to experience your unit without the clunkiness of a check-in experience at a front desk.
There's two questions I want to go off of those. First, I want to talk about the modern traveler.
Yeah.
What is that? Who is that? And what are they really looking for? You mentioned that they're looking to a place to kind of disconnect and really get connected to the brand aspect of it and you as the owner, and they want to feel as part of the vision and that they can shoot content that you're going to repost them on socials. And it's more of that collaborative community feel. But dive into a little bit, who is that modern traveler and how do you play into that?
Yeah, I mean, who he or she is. You might be them, right? I mean, you're going to Burning Man, Coachella. You're staying in the coolest Airbnb you can find, right? Maybe you're staying in a landscape hotel. You have an Apple Watch. You drive a Tesla. I mean, this is our sort of customer archetype of the modern traveler. They're interested in having a one-of-a-kind experience, staying in an inspirational unit and feeling an authentic connection to where they're staying.
Do you find that a lot of it plays into the social aspect of it? Like and I'll expand on that question. So obviously your property is extremely photogenic. Do you find that the modern traveler is looking for places that they can come and shoot social content as kind of a FOMO brag point to their friends on socials?
100%. I mean, I think that we're designing spaces and creating hotels that are as shareable as possible. And if they're shareable, then they have the potential to go viral. And one thing that I've realized as of late, I've said a lot, like we're designing for Instagram. And we didn't do that perfectly at Onera Fredericksburg, and we keep trying to get better at that. We were talking a little bit about Monarch, how it's amazing to shoot from the exterior. It's a little challenging due to the layout to get the amazing hero shoot through moment of Monarch from the interior. So we're fixing that in future properties in terms of how we design. But it's not just designing for Instagram, because if we're designing for Instagram, we're designing for what the modern traveler wants, right? So Instagram is just a proxy for what the customer wants, so that they can, shoot that video, shoot that photo for their followers, but also for their own memories, right? We're trying to create memories. We're trying to have experiences. So it's not just about social media. Social media is just an amazing, and we think the best indicator of what the modern traveler wants.
Onera. It's a great name. What's the origin of that? Hey, so if you're watching this video, you're probably interested in starting your own off-grid short-term rental. We have created a free masterclass on the 9 steps on how we started our off-grid short-term rental. It's all right here. It's a PDF version or video course. Guess what? It's completely for free. So go ahead, click the link below to download your free 9-step off-grid short-term rental masterclass. It's the blueprint that we use to do ours. And again, it's completely for free. Go ahead, download it. Our whole mission is to empower entrepreneurs to create more unique experiences so their guests can create more lifelong memories with their loved ones. I can tell you that hanging out with this kid with a bonfire in one of our units is my favorite pastime. So go ahead, click the link below to learn how to start your own off-grid short-term rental. All right, back to the video.
So Onera means dream in Greek. And part of the idea with Onera Fredericksburg was you're entering this dream-like world, right? Away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. and you're almost like entering this fantasy private bubble of a space. And one of the coolest things about Onera Fredericksburg is, you guys know, because you're staying here, Main Street, you could walk to Main Street, right? It's 15 or maybe a 15-minute walk. It's less than a mile away. And you pull off onto Bassey Lane where Onera Fredericksburg is, and all of a sudden you feel like you're in this enchanted forest next to a creek that feels like you're in the middle of nowhere. So it's like you're walking into this little dreamscape in nature.
It's pretty remarkable because that main road is paved, and then when you turn onto, it's a really well-groomed dirt road, right?
Granite gravel.
Granite gravel.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's different than asphalt. And when you drive onto it, you get the feeling of like, ooh, I'm entering to something. And then you turn left and go into the gate, and you're driving by the property. There is something magical in the way that you've designed the property in itself. Was there intentionality? A lot of the times we explain to people that want to start these stuff that you get moments of the guest experience to have them say, oh, wow. And one of those moments is when they pull into your property. Another moment is when they open the front door to a unit. And designing that, I call it the 16-second rule. You have 16 seconds. You have 16 seconds to really make them go, incredible. Like if something's not working in the property, that 16 seconds can override something being broken. And so how have you designed the first 16 seconds of pulling through the gate to really give that sense of, I'm here?
I think that's a great question. And first I want to just say that like that, oh, wow moment, the trying to blow people away. I mean, that starts with social media and our marketing, right? We want to blow people away from the moment they see the unit, inside or outside, or the property, the views. And then we want to meet that expectation when they get here. And that's hard, right? It is hard we've gotten good at social, we've gotten good at content. And so it's how do we meet that expectation when they actually show up? And I talked to Isaac French about this a bit. We're buddies. You know, he did Live Oak Lake just a couple hours away. And we talk about this, how you want to kind of excite them and create some intrigue on the entryway, but you don't want the entryway to be the focal point in the most aha wow moment, because then it's kind of a letdown from there. You want it to build, right? So when they get here, it's like, oh, this is kind of cool and different and subtle, maybe low profile, but like aesthetically still very pleasing when they first enter. And then as they're driving down the granite gravel road, there's some like suspense building. And then when they get to their amazing treehouse unit, it kind of punches them in the face with the wow moment that you're talking about. So, and I think that comes from doing something architecturally different, unique, amazing, taking a risk when it comes to that, right? Like, you know, designing a treehouse that looks like a monarch butterfly is not hard. I mean, it's not easy. It's costly and it's a risk. But we're doing it to get that wow moment from our guests when they see it.
I'd never really thought about the concept of the crescendo into the final presentation of the unit. And I always pictured of it where we want that a first banger and then a second banger. And I almost like that idea of it's only getting better until the final payoff of being at your unit. I think that's pretty magical. Do you have, in our property in Arizona, we have specific times that we can check in between or after 3 on some of the units and then after 4 on some of the units. But we found that a lot of the time, if our guest checks in at a certain time, it's a better experience than if a guest checks in, let's say at like 9 after the sunset, and they get a better. Is there a I'm trying to dig in deeper into that first time they see a property and how you can control as many external features of that initial view to get that crescendo up to the build. Is there a specific time that you try to control the guests into coming and arriving at Onera?
So I think that we're continuing to evolve this as we build new properties. At Onera Fredericksburg, it just so happens that certainly like later afternoon, evening, dusk is the best time to arrive, I would say. You know, me and my wife have spent a lot of time out here, and our favorite time is when the sun's setting. It sets over this, pretty good sized cow pasture on the other side of the entrance of Onera, Fredericksburg. So you kind of see that happening, the light waning. You can go for a walk over there and see the cows in the field. And it obviously, you get really nice lighting hitting the units, and sort of, coming. There's also really nice lighting actually early in the morning here as well, depending on which unit you're in. So you can have this amazing sunrise experience where the light is kind of, just peeking through the canopy of trees that you have by Monarch and by Spyglass. But it certainly impacts my decisions on future properties that we buy and that we build on. So Onera Wimberley, the property that we're opening later this summer, has the best west-facing views that I've seen anywhere around that area. You have these dramatic, long hill country views, and you're overlooking the quaint town of Wimberley and Cypress Creek, and it's all west-facing. So as guests arrive in the evening, it's beautiful, and it's just going to continue to get that much more beautiful until the sun sets.
We're going to get to Wimberley in a second, but I want to go back to, you mentioned social media and playing into social media, and then because your social media is so great and you have such phenomenal content, have you ever struggled with almost that being a kryptonite, in the sense of it's so great that when they get there, I'm not saying that the property lets down in any bit, but is there ever a mismatch between social media and arriving?
I think the only area we run into that, we have a variety of units at Onera Fredericksburg, right? And I'm pushing towards doing higher end, nicer units, more costly units, but more inspiring, more beautiful. And we do have some units that are not quite as differentiated. Maybe they're a little smaller. And I think most of our content on social media is obviously showcasing the nicest, coolest, most Instagrammable units we have. But then sometimes when people go to the website, they're like, oh, I'm going to save $1 and stay in one of these other units that's priced less. And that's where we do get some of that kind of, dissonance or discrepancy, right, between what they're expecting and what they're getting, which is why for future properties, we're only putting out top tier units that we know are going to blow people away. And that's what we're building for. So
we touched a little bit in the last podcast about your story, but I want to recap your story, and I'm going to do my best to recap it. Fill in the blanks if I mess it up. From Connecticut, lived in New York City, COVID happened, moved to Austin, had a pretty great urban short-term rental arbitrage business. And just for the viewers, can we let them know what short-term rental arbitrage is?
Yeah, so short-term rental arbitrage is leasing, apartments, townhomes, some sort of units, and then subleasing them, right? Renting them out on Airbnb or VRBO short-term. So
then you had a pretty profitable business doing that, and then started a management company from that with your partner, Jesse?
So that was with my partner, John Cole, who's my prior partner. And we had a few units that we had gotten the leases on, furnished, and they were profitable. And then I basically had friends that wanted to get into the space. And I helped find them apartments and furnish them, design them. And then we ultimately managed for them as well. And a lot of those people actually turned into some of the first investors for Onera Fredericksburg, because I had made them some money, right, as management clients. And so, they trusted me, and they believed that I could make them money again. And so they took a flyer on me with a treehouse hotel in Fredericksburg, Texas.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, so let's fill in the gaps here. You're still living in New York. Are you working full-time doing management, or what are you doing for work?
Until April of 2018, I was working for a software company, actually based out of San Francisco. We had an office in New York. I started my career in consulting. I worked at McKinsey, and this software company was doing text analytics for consulting firms. Were some of their biggest clients, because you could make these pretty graphics, and it was natural language processing mixed with like visualizations and clustering. So it was very intellectually stimulating and interesting. And, I did that for a couple of years and was kind of doing this Airbnb thing on the side, more of a side hustle, if you will. And it just became clear around that early early 2018 timeframe that like I'm making more money doing this other thing with less work than my software sales job. So, me and my partner, John, at the time, like decided, okay, I'm going to quit my job, run this thing full time. And we could afford to pay my salary because we had just taken on some management clients. So we knew the fees from those management clients would cover my base. And then, I had a sizable bonus potential as well. And we grew from 8 units when I quit my job to 200 by the end of 2019, right before COVID. So
it's incredible.
Yeah.
So then COVID happens.
Yep.
What happens to the business?
So I got to tell you the story of when COVID actually happened. So we were going to do our first offsite in the Philippines because I had built like this army in the Philippines, right, of amazing customer service folks and they did a lot more than that too. Bookkeeping, host statements, a whole bunch of stuff. General kind of like virtual assistant type work for me.
And not to cut you off, but you still use offshore Philippines people to manage Onera?
We do. We have a team. We definitely have a team over there, and we try to hire the best of the best.
Well, it's incredible. I want to get into all of that because that's something I'm going to adopt for our business in Arizona. Yeah. So I have a billion questions regarding that, but let's continue the story.
You definitely should. The one thing I would say, like, there's more competition for those folks today than 10 years ago when I started hiring them. And I actually started hiring them before my short-term rental company, and we can get into that at another time. But, pay them well. And get the best, and you'll get so much more out of them. It's like any other hiring, right? Like pay more for the A player and treat them well instead of trying to get like 2 B and C players to cover an A player's role because the A player is going to do more.
Yeah, the A player is going to cost double but get 30x the return.
Yeah,
there's some statistic there.
Something like that, right? I mean, mathematically, it only makes sense to hire A players, even though it costs more on the upfront. So I was over in the Philippines. We were doing our first offsite, and we had this amazing villa in Boracay, and everybody's having a good time. COVID was sort of like people were talking about it. There was like supposedly 3 confirmed cases in the Philippines when I went. My wife has a lot of upper respiratory issues, so she like wasn't happy about me going at all. And I was like, it's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. I get there, and Manila airport shuts down like the day or two after we got there. The US closed the border to Europe like a day into the trip. And that's when all of our bookings evaporated overnight. Like we just had, 90 some odd % cancellations in one day. And it was the middle of the night over there. And I'm with this 20-person team we've assembled, trying to have a good time and like morale boosting. And I'm, CEO leader of this. And I have to kind of reassure everyone while at the same time I'm like scared out of my mind. So that was a quick crash course in leadership. But
how do you handle that?
A lot of like going to the room and sort of like, existential crisis, and then, trying to come out and fake it till I make it in terms of, reassuring everybody that we're going to be all right. When we were actually over there, we started applying for PPP and some of the programs that were already getting released. We started negotiating with landlords, and thankfully a lot of the landlords were happy to hear whatever we were going to offer them because a lot of people were just squatting, right? Weren't paying at all. So we were able to negotiate some win-wins that allowed us to survive, but it was terrifying. And it was the end of this just, massively profitable urban short-term rental and lease arbitrage business that we had. And so, I think if it wasn't for that, I might still just be doing that today and sort of jumping to new markets where regulation's more favorable. But because of that, it pushed me to do something very different that I had wanted to do for a while, but I was kind of distracted by this short-term rental business that we had built. And so that's what pushed me into building Onera. So we started looking for land. Me and my wife had just finished a Southwestern road trip.
Before you get into Onera, what did it teach you leadership-wise? That moment, you're with 20 employees that are counting on you to be strong and lead them. And there's a level of brave face, but there's also a level of uncertainty that you have to have. What do you think was the biggest takeaway that you've learned from that experience?
I think the biggest thing was shifting perspective of like, it's not about me. It's about them. It's about the business surviving, which in turn helps the team. And I try to take that with me even now, like being a service-oriented leader. Like I am acting and leading in service of the team, right? Like even the stuff we're doing now, podcasting, being out there on social media, like that was not my first choice. But my co-founder said, like, you have to do this. We have to be founder led. And this is what's going to allow us to win in the space. And so I did it, even though I was uncomfortable and I didn't necessarily want to do it.
And I just rope you into a podcast.
No, but now I like doing it and I'm more comfortable, but that's, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? You hear a lot of successful people say that, and like, be okay with being a beginner. I think that's another big one. I had no idea what I was doing when I started doing a lot of this stuff, but we learn from people that do know what they're doing, that have more experience. We make a lot of mistakes and we iterate from there. But yeah, I think it's just around with service-oriented leadership. And if it's not about me, it's less scary, right? It's like, what can I do and say that's going to reassure the team and make sure they know that, like, we're going to do everything we can to maintain this amazing team that we built. And by and large, we did. I mean, thankfully they were, relatively low cost labor. We had very low overhead. We had built the company very lean. So I think we laid off, it was probably less than 25, 30% of the team, which, given what happened to our bookings, was pretty remarkable that we were able to keep that many folks.
It's incredible.
And we rehired a number of them back later. So your
business goes upside down. COVID happens. You're still living in New York City?
I was. No, COVID. I'd moved to Austin November of 2019. And then we actually bought our house in Austin February 1st of 2020. So the timing worked out pretty well there. I shifted from a 750 square foot apartment in New York, which was pretty big for New York standards, to a couple thousand square foot house with a pool in Austin. So it was a much better place to spend the pandemic.
Yeah, my entire apartment in New York City was about the size of this living room. 2-bedroom apartment with another guy. Yeah, it was great. So you're living in Austin. What stems the idea of starting a landscape hotel?
I think it was a number of factors that kind of came together at once, right? One of them was COVID and the urban rental business just getting obliterated. And seeing just acceleration of this outdoor hospitality, unique stay space that COVID just helped add fuel to the fire. It was already going before that, but COVID kind of accelerated the hell out of it. My partner now, Jesse, had this compound in Joshua Tree where he had an Airstream, a converted bus, a converted garage, and it was in this, amazing, beautiful landscape of Joshua trees and mountains and boulders. So I had spent time there. I had seen the numbers he was doing and was just kind of blown away by how profitable it was and how much the guests loved it. Like, you would read these, we call them novellas, right? These like novels of reviews of how they had this life-changing experience at his property. And so that really led me to, okay, there's something here. And then I was interested in it. And then me and my wife did a road trip around the southwestern US. We actually borrowed Jesse's RV. We started in Joshua Tree. We drove up through Utah, hit all the national parks there, down through Colorado, New Mexico, over to Arizona, and then up through and around California. We saw a dozen national parks over like 5 or 6 weeks. And RV life was awesome. And going to like BLM land, which is like free camping land, which kind of feels like you're in the middle of a national park, with much fewer people around than actually in the park. And those experiences were amazing. Waking up to these dramatic, mesas and rolling hills and mountains, depending on where we were, it was absolutely incredible. But all the issues we encountered with the RV was not incredible. And I'm not the handiest guy in the room. And so we had a lot of, gaffes and sort of, there was one time our exterior compartment kind of came unhitched and a bunch of our stuff ended up littered on the side of the highway. Another time that we had to drive like 4 hours at 15 miles an hour because there was something wrong with like one of the mechanical components of the RV. So we dealt with all these issues and it was part of the story and it was fine. But, in wanting to create Onera and more of a luxury landscape hotel or luxury glamping resort, we wanted there to be as little friction as possible. So all the comforts of home and then some. And that was the kind of guiding light behind Onera and the units we were doing here. I wanted it to be more upscale. I wanted it to be, with the hot tub, with the kitchen, the nice bathroom inside the unit. I had seen a lot of these other glamping resorts that were more mid-tier and still just one step above of roughing it. And there weren't enough folks that were delivering this really nice white glove, frictionless experience.
I want to get into the tiered structures because I think that's really important. Before we do that, I want to talk about land. I want to talk about how you bought this land, how you found it, and then kind of I really want to dive into the financing aspect of it, but I want to touch on a little bit here as well. You're wanting to start this property. First step is why Fredericksburg?
So I was living in Austin, and I knew for my first development project, I wanted to be relatively close to home. I think when I first started thinking about this project, we were thinking about having kids. I don't know if my wife was pregnant yet, so didn't want to be away all the time. And so good news was Austin was booming. A bunch of the areas around Austin were booming. So there were areas that were optimal to build this type of product anyway. And we identified Wimberley and Fredericksburg as the two best markets that we could find. And in identifying the markets, we talked about this before, but the idea was, how do we maximize revenue per square foot? Was kind of, looking back on it, like that's what we were trying to do. And it was, how do we create, or what are the markets that are going to support a small couples unit doing $100,000 a year, right? Like a small unit that we could make as a unique stay, treehouse, whatever, that was going to just massively outperform in terms of revenue. And we saw a couple of indications of that in Wimberley and Fredericksburg. So there were not many comps, right? Almost none, but there was, a really cool, unique cabin with an amazing view and a small pool in Wimberley that was doing like $140,000 a year. That was interesting. In Fredericksburg, there was a small, treehouse place that was basically like, cabins up a flight of stairs, but nestled in some beautiful trees with some string lights. And those were doing really well, $100K a year plus. So I knew that we could at least deliver something as cool and as good as they had done, and maybe take it to the next level. So even higher revenues were potentially on the table. So that's what kind of pushed me to Wimberley and Fredericksburg. Actually wanted to do Wimberley first, and just happened to find the land in Fredericksburg before I found the land in Wimberley. So we can get into that if you want, how we picked the land. But
when I talk to people that want to do these type of resorts, I have them do the exact same thing. It's print out a map of where you live and literally draw a circle with a radius of a 3-hour drive from where you currently live right now, because you're going, at least for your first one, you're going to want to live sub 3 hours. I mean, I'm 7.5 hours from where I live in California to our properties, and I do that drive. I do not suggest doing that. But I do think it's very important, even an hour away, right? And then choosing an eclectic town that has, just as you said, a cabin, a couples. And I really like that strategy that you just said of finding a couples property that is doing plus 6 figures in already, that you can just elevate. I saw in Arizona these Airstreams that people were making $70,000, $80,000 on an Airstream. And I was like, these are decorated terribly. There's no experiences. I can do this better. And so I had a similar concept of seeing something of it already working for someone, but knowing the vision of where I can take it, I think is important. So when looking for a market, I like the idea of, one, choosing something locally that you can drive to, and then 2, finding a property that's already doing well, that you can then make a lot better. So you found Fredericksburg, Wimberley, you knew the market, how the next step would be acquiring land. Before you acquire land, land has to be purchased. I know that you ended up raising money. Did you already raise money at this point?
So I do want to say, first off, like, it wasn't just like, oh, we found the land. I whiffed on a few properties before we found this property. One, I was too slow, lost it. Never let that happen again. I'll tell you that. Another one, we got under contract immediately that I really loved. In another market I liked, Dripping Springs, which is close by, a massive wedding venue market with not enough cabins and places for people to stay. So it was ideal. But I was green, and the listing agent and the broker were all like, no restrictions, do what you want. And after like 10 grand in due diligence, we actually fully reviewed the deed, and we couldn't do what we wanted to do. So that was a expensive lesson in the grand scheme of things, like not that expensive. I'm now doing, $20 million plus resorts. But it was a lesson I had to learn. And then I remember I'd been interested in this property because of how close to town it was, and being on Barron's Creek, which is like the main water tributary that goes through Fredericksburg, and just how lush and green and vegetated it was, where a lot of Fredericksburg is like open pasture land. So it was very unique in a place that we could actually do tree houses. But the original tract of land was like double the price of what this was listed for. It was way above market. Clearly the seller was just kind of like, waiting to see if he could get this number. So didn't move on that one, but his brother, because it's like 4 tracts of land owned by the same family basically. And his brother listed his property for like half the price a few months later after I had seen the original property. And so I went out and saw it the next day. I think we were actually away in Connecticut with my family. And I don't know if I chose to fly back or we were happening to fly back the next day, but drove immediately out here, saw the property, got it under contract the next day. Like I knew immediately, right? Proximity to Main Street, the price, being on Barron's Creek, all of these amazing trees. And there was this really cool dry or wet weather creek that sort of went through the middle of the property, which decreases the value for most other landowners because it's less buildable area. But for us, it created this really nice, feature that we could line all of the units on.
You have the land. How were you already liquid enough to purchase land? Did you get like a loan on it? Do you have debt on it?
Yeah. So even before we purchased the land, I did raise the money, what I thought I was going to need the equity to build the whole project. And we had a bank that was willing to finance the construction of tree houses and safari tents and all this wild stuff, which was, no small feat. I mean, I talked to probably 20 banks, and it was likely more than that, but that's just what I care to remember was 19 no's. And finally I got one yes. I got this, loan officer that loved it, wanted to take his wife here, knew the area, and was willing to go to bat for us in loan committee to say like, this is the future, amazing location. This kind of product is going to do amazingly well, especially, during COVID times. So was able to get approved for financing. We also used the short-term rental business that I had, previous that we had built up and had nice tax returns, at least for 2018 and 2019. And we were looking for debt in 2020. So didn't have to show the 2020 tax return just yet. So we were able to get financing, and use that company as a guarantor on the debt for this project. And then the equity, it was literally like, it was the easiest raise I've ever done in the sense that I'd never really tried to raise money before. And I just hit up all of our clients from the short-term rental business. We only had to raise a little under $1 million, and they all were, had a decent amount of money and were interested in this space. And I had already made them money. So they all wrote 100 to 200K checks, and, we had a handful of investors, and we had the initial equity for this property.
That's the power that was the biggest lesson I've learned in my career thus far, is the power of making other people money and what that does to not only your credibility, but to any ask that you have in the future. The easiest way to ask for something from someone is make them a lot of money first.
100%. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I think the other thing I'll add to that when it comes to our strategy now with raising money and investors is we want to have as inspiring, engaging, and exciting of an investor experience as we do with our guests. So we create, Loom videos explaining the property that are very visually appealing. We create these amazing renderings of what the project's going to look like. And, we pay money to have those renderings done so that our investors can see the vision, and also so that we attract the right investors. I think there's a piece of that too, like in trying to serve the customer, the modern traveler, in the best way we can, we need to have the right investors, because the wrong investors will, hammer you on cost per key, hammer you on a monthly P&L, instead of trying to look at the bigger vision of just how do we serve the customer best and give them exactly what we want, what they want. And if we do, the money's going to happen, right? We've seen that. And the cost per key doesn't matter. If it costs me $1 million a key to deliver the best experience possible for the modern traveler, my ADR is going to be $1,000 a night, $1,500 a night plus, with super high occupancy. So, it all comes down to that relentless focus on the customer and like, how do we attract the right investors that share in that vision?
That's so crucial. I couldn't agree more, actually, because we have dealt with both. We've dealt with investors that have the idea of we're penny pinching dollars, and this is being ran as a finance business. And then we've had the investor of someone who stayed at the property first and then fell in love with the property and then said, I want in. And our best investors are actually our guests.
Yeah. They are your customer.
Yeah.
Right, 100%. And yeah, we see the same thing.
So I think that's super crucial on a tactical thing. If someone's raising money is wanting investors, have that investor stay in a property that's something that you want to build so that they understand what you're building, because this isn't a hotel. This isn't a business retreat or business hotel where people are checking in at the Marriott and checking in the next day and they're going to a convention. This is a place to disconnect and spend time with your loved ones, and someone who can already feel that experience before they invest will understand the pain points that you go. If you're like, hey, we need another mini split in the bedroom, they understand why. Not that it's going to be a $2,400 additional expense, but they go, yeah, that makes sense. Let's add that.
Yeah, and you just need people that get it, right? Because the worst thing is when I talk to investors and they're like, oh, well, your cost per key's, higher than the Marriott. And it's like, yeah, our product's way better than the Marriott, A, and B, our RevPAR, or our revenues, let's just say, are double the best performing hotel in Texas, according to Star Report. Our better units at Onera is over 500, and on all the units, it's over 400. So, yeah, to compare us on a cost per key basis to a big brand hotel, it doesn't make sense. And if somebody does that, it's clear that they don't get it. So
it's almost like the wave of social media, and you have people being like, oh yeah, this social media thing is going to I'm not going to get into social media because it's not the way of the future. And then I think there's a correlation between these big hotels and creating more unique experiences like this. I genuinely think that unique experiences like this are the way of the future, and people are more and more likely to book these out and spend the extra $200 for that experience than they are to stay at the inn on Main Street.
I mean, we see it in the numbers. Like we know it, right? That this is the future of travel, and that's why we're all in on it. And it's what people want, and we want to deliver what they want. So, on a random, Thursday in shoulder season, there'll be 200 places available at $150 a night. And we'll be booking our units at $450, $500, $700, something, you know what I mean? So like we're getting multiples on what the commodity product is getting, and, on days that aren't even typically high demand.
Find the land, you buy the land. What does the land come with? And I think that's the number one question I get a lot with people that want to start these stuff is like, what should I be looking for? And having utilities on the land is like you're light years ahead of other people. We have just raw land with pure rock after 16 inches. So septic units cost a fortune. There's no possible way you can do a well. So we haul our water. We're completely off grid with solar panels. What did this land come with?
Pretty much nothing. I mean, we had access to power. So there was that, but that was it. I mean, there's nothing else here, right? That's not true. There was a small RV that had, hookups for that RV, which needed to get updated anyway. But, and we didn't really even end up using any of that stuff. So we're pretty close to the raw land camp of nothing here. For me, what matters with the land now more than ever is that when somebody comes to the property, I need them to have an autonomic response of I have to pull out my phone and share this. I have to take a video. Like if when they come and, I think that we came close to that here. We tried to create it with the units, but at future properties and the property that I'm building next, Owasso Hill Country, it's in this area that borders what's called Devil's Backbone, the most amazing views that I've seen anywhere around here. Probably the best views in Texas outside of West Texas. And it's this canyon where it's totally unobstructed, no houses, no power lines, no nothing, with these dramatic rolling hills. And when you go there, you can't help but pull out your phone and take a photo or video. So, that's what we look for. And, okay, if we have to do a little more work on the utilities front, so be it. Like I can't like recreate that. That's either there or it's not. So that's the number one thing. When it comes to utilities, look, water is a big issue in the Texas Hill Country and most of the Southwest. We do dig commercial wells. It's quite a process to do these bigger properties that I'm doing now. It's quite expensive, and you have to get buy-in from the local water district and all these folks. But we try to do whatever we can, and I think you do this as well, to be environmental stewards. So like we have a goal of net zero water, which is a very hard goal to hit on our next property. And I don't know that we'll hit it, but maybe we'll come close. And it's through
Quickly explain what net zero water is.
Yeah, so it's using all alternative to well water. So you guys haul in water, which is kind of down the list of how we'd like to do things. We'd like to have sustainable water creation, and that's things like rainwater capture and having enough holding tanks to capture and store and treat all the water that we do capture with rainwater. We use gray water to irrigate. So we can pull from shower, which we're actually doing at our next property, Onera, Wimberley, that has green roofs. All of those green roofs are irrigated using gray water systems. And we use native landscaping to begin with, which has much less watering needs than non-native species. And another one is air to water generation, where we're actually pulling humidity out of the air to create usable water. So we're trying to do all these things to get to net zero. And it's a lofty goal. Hopefully we'll get as close as we possibly can. So that's the waterfront.
Really quickly there. I think a lot of that terminology probably went over a lot of people's head.
Yep.
Difference between black water and gray water. Gray water is going to be your shower and your bathroom sink. Your black water is going to be your toilet and your kitchen sink. Kitchen sink, because food goes down there technically, at least in Arizona, it's considered black water. You're able to repurpose your gray water, which is going to be your shower, your bathroom sink, into your agriculture. So into watering plants and flowers or whatever other ways you do it. Capturing the moisture from air, that technology is incredible. I haven't even heard of that.
It's I don't think it's new, but it is something that we are really trying to explore and figure out how to leverage at Owasso Hill Country. And part of it is like we have these amazing water features, and there's a lot of evaporation, and so there's moisture in the air, and it's like, how do we recapture some of that?
The first one that you mentioned was
rainwater. Yeah.
Rainwater. So that's basically from all of your rooftop buildings that drain out. Is there another way that you're going to try to capture rainwater than just roof?
So it's trying to create more roof space, actually. So we're thinking about putting a massive carport over our parking lot, which, I think is a value add. I think people will appreciate it. The cars won't get as hot. And it also allows us to capture that much more rainwater, because it really does just come down to what's the square footage of roof space that you have to capture. And then your storage is a big piece. So
you find land that has power, but nothing else. And so it's really getting to work on utilities. How was that process like regarding your septic? And I mean, tying into power, but how was the process with doing your commercial well and then doing septic units?
So, I would say the septic and the well, the water is the hardest piece of what we do in the Hill Country, just because water is so scarce. And that's why we're trying to do all the things that I mentioned, both to be environmental stewards and because water is an issue. And also because, that's the indicator to the water district and the community that we are doing things the right way, right? That's how we put our kind of best foot forward there. So it's been challenging when it comes to the wells. We've hired, the best water rights attorneys in the state and, the best aquatics engineers in the state, and all of these folks to be on our team to help shepherd us through this process of getting a commercial well permit and just having, sufficient water to run the site. So it's hard, it's expensive. Our public water supply system at Onera Wimberley is probably pretty close to $500,000 all in. Now that's for a 28 unit site, $23 million build. So it's, it makes sense at that level. And then on the septic side of things,
repeat what you just said one more time.
Yeah. That the public water system that we have at Onera Wimberley is $500,000. And that's, again, on a $23 million project. So it makes sense at that level. And the code is written in a way that, it's on bigger scale projects where that comes into play. So you have to be above 15 connections in order to be bumped into having to do a public water supply. And so we were not in that designation for Onera Fredericksburg as is. We have 11 connections. And then when we do our expansion, we'll be at 34. So we are creating a public water system as we do the expansion here.
What is a public water system?
It's a designation of more than 15 connections, having more than 50 people on the site, more than like 26 days a year, something like that. It was actually, the code was based around churches because they wanted to allow them to have weddings once a week. So if you have more than that, then you get kicked into this public water supply situation. It just comes down to water treatment, and, it's a higher standard for the water that you're producing and having people drink. And so, yeah, it's important, obviously, that you do all those things the right way, but it's also a hurdle to development. So it's something that is used to kind of stem the tide of development. And, in Texas, in unincorporated counties, you can kind of do what you want outside of the water. So that is kind of this limiting factor and mechanism that's used to kind of pump the brakes on certain development.
So let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Permitting and zoning, you don't have building permits out here.
We don't, no, not in unincorporated areas. Yeah. So both of our properties are actually what's called the ETJ, which borders the city limits. And we could be annexed at some point. So today, actually, we voluntarily build to the city codes in case we ever are annexed. And just from a liability standpoint, like we want to meet all the fire safety requirements. We want to do everything that we're supposed to do from a building standpoint, regardless, to make sure we have safe structures with longevity.
Also, I'm sure it plays into insurance.
Insurance, 100%. Yeah. Also insurance. We sprinkler units now, which we didn't used to, and we don't have to, but we do it for insurance reasons, and also, fire safety, life safety, when it comes to, wildfires that we definitely get in the hill country, just like you guys get in California.
So building permits did you have to do septic permits or no?
Yes, we do have to do septic permits as well. And there's restrictions on the amount of septic and what's called Q, which is effectively your septic capacity on a certain amount of acreage. So we have had the benefit of a lot of times the sites we've bought have been multiple tracts of land already. So we've been able to put septic on multiple tracts of land because there's only so much septic capacity you can put on one track.
How many septic units do you have in Fredericksburg, Onera?
Onera Fredericksburg, we have 2 pretty sizable leach fields, septic fields. Yep. And then we're building another massive one for phase 2.
The actual units themselves, do each unit have their own tank?
They flow into a main system.
Oh, so they all flow into one system?
They flow into one system. Yeah, we have tanks and a pump system that pumps them up to the leach fields. Yeah, to the septic fields. Yeah.
Just so that everyone, just a high level version of an explanation of what a septic unit is. You have all of your black water, and if you repurpose your gray water, then all of your black water goes from your home into a tank, gets treated in the tank. From the tank, it goes into a thing called leach field, which is basically how the water, once it's treated, gets dispersed.
Correct. Yep.
Now, you guys only have one central tank that all of your units flow into?
So no, we do have multiple septic tanks.
Okay.
And we have 2 sizable leach fields. The septic fields.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's actually a couple right down here because this is one of the low points of the property. So gravity feeds everything down here, and then it gets pumped to the fields that are back up.
That was my next question on.
Yeah.
So you guys gravity fed into your tanks.
Yep.
And then pump back into your
grinder
leach
pump,
fields.
treat.
Yep.
And then it goes back to the leach field.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing for us to learn, and that hurdle of septics and making sure that you position your septic in a position where you don't have to pump from home to septic. You at least use some type of gravity into your septic units, which was, how many units do you have per septic tank?
That's a good question.
That's a big question I get a lot from
I don't know if I have the answer to that for you. I could kind of guesstimate. I'm pretty sure we have 5 and 11 units. So roughly 2 per unit.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So you have...
And one more thing to say on the gravity thing, I have this amazing general contractor that helps us come in on time, on budget. Like, he knows way more the nitty-gritty details than I do. But I have learned that it's not just about the cost of pumping. Gravity is just better for feeding septic tanks in terms of like from the unit to the tank. It's much easier to then, grinder pump and then pump it back out to a leach field from there, but you want the initial flow to be gravity.
Yeah. My understanding of that is that you have, when you're gravity filled, it's 1/4 of an inch gravity per foot. And when it's gravity fed, the toilet paper and all of the solids move with the liquids. And so you don't have to worry about it getting clogged because of the consistency of the movement. Compared to a pump, you don't get to control the movements. And if the liquids move too quicker than the solids.
Which they will inevitably. Yeah, totally. And then I think that it's also a consideration with gray water systems, because if you're pulling out all the gray water, that is effectively something that would help the solids move otherwise. So you really have to be careful with that too.
I love the fact that we're spending like 5 minutes talking about shit right now. It's great. I wanted to name the segment, Let's Shit Talk or Talking Shit.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I'm glad that we were able to just chat about
Riff
that a little bit.
Yep.
My favorite section is probably, at least with you, is our structures. And these structures are incredible. I mean, we discussed in the first podcast that when you build a product so great, the marketing and the sales takes care of itself. And I think that is truly what you've done here, is you've built beautiful, beautiful products that anyone with their iPhone can take a video or a picture, put it on social media, and they're immediately professional photographers because of what you built, because of what they're shooting. It's like shooting Brad Pitt. Like and by the way, you got compared to Brad Pitt by someone else when they saw your first podcast. They were like, yeah, Ben Wolff looks like Brad Pitt. I was like,
wow, that is the nicest thing that I've ever heard somebody say about the way I look. I've been compared, I get Lionel Messi a lot, that I look like Messi, which I kind of see probably more than Brad Pitt, but that's a great compliment. So appreciate that, whoever said it.
But that's what your structures are. Your structures are the Brad Pitt of actors. And so there's a couple different aspects I first want to dive into the tier system, because you mentioned that in the first podcast, and I didn't probe at it, and I want to probe at it now of what are the tier systems of structures?
When you say tier systems, like what do we consider our top tier, mid tier units type thing?
I first want to explain what the tier systems are. So like, let's say that there's 3, let's say that there's 4 of them. The bottom 4th tier would be your pitched tent. You're getting pitched tent, no real utilities, pitched tent on ground. You're at $25-$50 a night. Now your whole cost to set that up is probably $3,000. But that's probably tier 4. I'd put then tier 3 as your Airstream. And I think that's where we're at. Tier 3 is your Airstream, your camper, your $100 a night. And then this is where I want you to jump in, and I want to explain what tier 2 and then tier 1 is.
Yeah. So I think with that tiering system, all of our units here, I would say, are tier 2 and tier 1. And I can explain kind of what those are in my view, but I will say that we're only trying to build tier 1 now. And I'll talk about why that is as well. So tier 2 is going to be, unique. I mean, it might be a unit that you see in a lot of different places, a dome, a smaller container home, a yurt, right? It's been done, but you did it well. It's got decently nice amenities. It's got, pretty nice design. And that's kind of your tier 2. So like, it's kind of an oxymoron, but like unique, kind of what's becoming commoditized though, product. And then for me, tier 1 is not only luxury and a higher level of amenities and finishes and all the rest, but it's extraordinarily unique. I mean, what we call one of one, effectively it does not exist. Whether that's due to the view, the unit itself, the amenities, like something about it, and ideally all of it is one of one. And that's what we're trying to shoot for with tier 1. I mean, that's what I like to think Monarch is. You were very complimentary. I think there's a lot of room for improvement for us still. I think we made some mistakes on Monarch and we're going to continue to get better. But why just tier one is probably the next question. Like why jump to that? And then the follow-on question is, I have limited resources. Like I can't necessarily do a tier one. I will say that what I always tell people that are trying to get into this unique stay space, build fewer, better units. So like instead of going and trying to build 3 or 4, just build one and make it incredible. Make it one of one. It's going to make your social media branding that much easier, getting viral content. Your margins are going to skyrocket, right? When you have one amazing unit, your occupancy is going to be higher. You only have one unit to fill, and you might be doing $600 a night on that unit instead of $100 a night on 4 units. So,
I might push back on that.
Okay.
I might push back on doing one. I think there's something. And the only reason why I'd push back is that I think that you get in that allows people to get into the 2 analysis paralysis on that one. And they spend too much time building it out. And so this is my
just
pushback.
don't do that. Just don't do that.
Just take the risk.
Just don't do that analysis paralysis thing.
I think the fact that we did 3 like an Airstream, a camper, like these I'd put them at 3, right? I'd put them at this tier 3 of like, but we did 3 of them, and I had to I was forced to learn the business as quickly as possible. And I think there's something special in learning the management and the marketing side of it well, because I think there's something there. I don't disagree that doing a nicer, because we're selling all of our units, right? I think we have all of our units are at tier 3, and then we have one unit that we designed ourselves that's at a tier 2. And I don't think we're even at the tier 1 yet. That's like the Dave Portnoy pizza reviews. You're never going to get the 10. And that's the thing to aspire to. The thing to aspire to is the 1, and it's Elon Musk's SpaceX that you turn into an Airbnb. Like it's like the things that are, and I think that I don't know, how I see it is that tier 1 is something to always strive for. And that if I can live at that tier 2 mark is at least for, that might be a blind spot that I need to overcome.
It might be a limiting belief. Dex. It might be a limiting belief. I got to ask you a question. If you pooled all your resources, how many units do you have? 7. Okay. And let's say you did 2 of the most badass units you could conceive of with some great designers and architects, and you just went all out on those 2 units. What's your collective following on the units you have now? Followers on social? Not your personal, but like the units themselves, right?
So that's where you haven't
done as much there.
We haven't dived in because I've a trillion excuses. I won't give you any of them.
So I guess the question is, if you just pulled all your resources and built 2 of the most amazing units you could imagine, do you think you'd have 1 million followers with everything you know about content for those 2 units?
Easily.
Yeah. So how valuable is that audience?
But again, we're only going to be maxing at $500 a night.
No matter what, because of the location.
Yeah.
So pick a better location. Right.
I mean, we're in the Grand Canyon. I think we're in a pretty great location, occupancy wise.
You're in the Grand Canyon. There's no way that you can't get higher than $500 a night. If you had an absolutely one of one stay, you don't think there's people going to the Grand Canyon that want the coolest Airbnb or the coolest landscape hotel unit anywhere in the country?
Let me ask you this: what are you willing to drop below? So, like for example, our tiny home, we won't drop below $300 a night because it attracts a guest that we don't like. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to formulate that quite, because it's too harsh the way I just said it, but it's...
Hold on a second. You're getting $300 a night on tier 3?
No, that's tier 2, I think. The tiny home it has a 4x6 skylight. It's basically imagine this, but everything's windows.
Got it. Okay. I was going to say, if you're getting $300 on tier 3, there's no chance that you're not going to get $1,200 a night with tier 1. So...
It's a limiting belief. I am swallowing a pill right now, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because I now have switched my mindset.
Well, you might as well try one now, right? Just try to go all out in the next one.
It's a limiting belief because
pull your resources.
To finish where we were at, we're actually selling all of our tier 3 units and only building tier 2 and above.
Nice.
But I think there was something valuable in learning the business at tier 3, especially because I didn't have the money. And we
100% agree.
The money aspect of it.
I 100% agree with you. You start where you can. So if you can't afford for whatever reason, resources, network to do a tier 1, then do a tier 3 and lean super into the customer experience side of things that don't cost money, just to like wow people, blow them away, get them to write novel reviews for you, right? Like there's things you can do, take them on a horseback ride, like really get into learning your customer and what makes them tick and what they love. And then you'll massively outperform on a tier 3 unit, and then you can use that to raise money. So I think that's totally
So that's what
great.
I meant to say.
Yes, yeah, totally warranted. And that's fantastic. If you do have but I think there's a lot of people, I see so many people out there that are like, they want to do 10 or 15 or 20 units. And it's like, just do the 5 most banger units in, a 3-hour radius of where you are. It's less work, higher margin.
If you have the resources,
Yeah.
for sure do it. There's also a level of bootstrapping. I heard this example of, someone said this on a podcast and I really liked it. A lot of people will keep on looking at the scope and will never fire the first bullet.
Yeah.
And I think there's something special about firing the first bullet, knowing that you then can look through the scope and aim.
It's never going to be perfect either way. That's how I look at it. Like no matter how much you aim, it's like it's never going to be perfect.
You build a perfect unit, and you as the owner can.
It's not perfect. So it's never going to be perfect.
I'd argue with that aspect of it.
I've stayed in it a lot more times than you have. So it's and we've heard from guests, right? Like we take their feedback to heart. I've heard from photographers and videographers. Like I know it's not perfect, and so I'm not going to let that stop me from putting something out there, because either way, it's got to get iterated and get better. And the way that we're going to get better is by seeing customers interact with it, whether that's on social or in person, hearing their reviews. Like that's how we're going to get better. So it's like, 80-20 rule, right? Like I'm 80% sure that, this is the right thing to move forward with. It's going to blow people away. I think the big thing is, uniqueness and one of one, like leaning into that it's differentiated. And if you don't have an aesthetic eye, then like, I guess lean on somebody that does, so you're not building some monstrosity. that scares me a little bit. Like I'm not a designer or an architect, but I know what looks good, right? I think that's something that I do have innately. And if you don't have that, like sanity check it with some people, because we could see some pretty like monstrosity stuff getting built out there otherwise. But that's what I would say about, building one of one differentiated.
I'm going to push you to ruthlessly grade your own units on the tier system.
Okay.
You don't have to do all of them, but do as many as you want. Name a unit, put it in a tier.
So based on the tier system that we developed, again, I think everything that we built so far is tier 2 or tier 1. And I would really only put 3 units in the tier 2 bucket. And those are the smaller container homes that we added after the fact, because our ownership was pressuring us on cost per key, some of the things that I was talking about before. So we needed to drive cost per key down, have more units. So we added these 3 smaller container homes, 20 footers, basically just a bed and a bathroom, small kitchenette. And they're tier 2, right? I mean, it's more of a commodity product. It's been done. You're at Onera, so there's a cool element to that, right? You still get access to the communal amenities, the pool. You do get a hot tub, private hot tub for your unit. So it's I don't think it's a tier 3 or tier 4, but tier 2. I think the rest of our units are tier 1, and it's just kind of levels of tier 1. There's operational headaches for us with the soft-sided tented structures. They still sell pretty well, but they don't last as long. You have to get new windows and parts and stuff like that all the time, which is an operational headache. And there's better and worse tented manufacturers. Like we love Bush Tech. They're one of the groups that we have worked with, and their product's been really great, but it's still not going to last as long as a hard-sided structure. And there's less, in my mind, there's less unique, novel things you can do with a soft-sided structure. With hard-sided, like you can do whatever you want. It's harder to create monarch in a tent, right? And have it have the same look and feel as it does hard-sided.
Do you have a preference between hard-sided versus soft-sided?
I do. Currently, we're leaning definitely towards hard-sided because of the insulation is better. So it's easier to heat and cool. There's more unique things we can do architecturally. It's easier to waterproof. Like, it's easier to replace parts and things last longer. So there's a bunch of reasons why we do like hard-sided. And so far we have seen our hard-sided units command a premium. So we do get a higher rate. Some of that I think is due to we've just done more unique stuff with the hard-sided because we can. So
I explain it as the soft-sided is on average, maybe not yours, but on average are cheaper to get into, but they depreciate faster. So it's more wear and tear and it's harder to maintain, but they are easier / cheaper to get into compared to hard-sided will last longer. If you build them yourself, you know exactly where they're built. So you know where your electrical wires are ran. You know where your water lines are ran. If something breaks, you know exactly how it was built. Therefore, you can fix it. When you're on a soft-sided, it comes a little bit trickier when you start buying kits or from different manufacturers.
The cost disparity between soft-sided and hard-sided shrinks in terms of percentage as you go up the tiers. So like a tier 1 soft-sided unit isn't that much cheaper than a hard-sided unit because you're still doing all the interior finishes. You're still doing a bathroom. You're still doing the interior walls. You're still doing a beautiful deck with a hot tub on a beautiful piece of land. Like there's so many sunk costs. The only thing that you're saving on is the framing, right? The roof, like some of those things you're saving on. But, you know, for us, there was roughly like a 15% savings on soft-sided versus hard-sided. And I think we're getting that back in rate and more than getting it back in operational headaches and maintenance and replacement.
And allows you to have that one of one because when you're a soft-sided tent, you're buying it from a manufacturer, therefore other people can buy it.
Totally.
And when you have a hard-sided something that you design, if someone rips off your design, they rip off your design. And so that we ran into that. We bought a hard-sided tiny home from a manufacturing company. Airbnb reached out to us, ended up paying us a good lump of money to license a photo of that unit. And I was looking back and I was like, well, who's winning from this? The company who built the tiny home and Airbnb. Nothing went back to our listing and nothing went back to any intellectual property that we had because we merely bought it from a different company. If someone posts this photo of Monarch, this is Monarch at Onera, Fredericksburg. This isn't a kit you can buy from someone else. This is this unit. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that.
%. Yeah. And I mean, look, I'll go a step further and like we've thought about and really considered and tried to build more modular, and we want to do that in the future. It's just come down to the sites that we've chosen and the amazing views and the grade changes have been extraordinarily challenging to bring in modular units. So like from a cost and time standpoint, it ends up just making more sense to build it on site. But we're always trying to find a way that we can do a modular and be able to build custom modular, right? Like, you know, create this amazing one-of-a-kind unit type that we have an exclusive on that design and then work with a modular manufacturer to create it.
You mentioned the last podcast, which I didn't dive into either, that I really want to probe into as well. Cost per square footage, which I think is a very interesting concept. It's how do we maximize the amount of money per the amount of square footage that you have? Because you can get a 4-bedroom beautiful cabin and rent it out for $400, or you can rent out Monarch for $400, $600, $700 plus. And this would be a 1/10 of the size of a 4-bedroom cabin in the Smokies. How do you maximize cost per square footage, and what's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so it's maximizing revenue per square footage, and part of that is because the cost per square foot is very high for the kind of stuff that we build. To build tier 1, one-of-a-kind, custom, in some cases bespoke units is expensive, oftentimes elevated 10, 15, 30 feet in the air. So the bigger those units get, I mean, the cost skyrockets. And so if we can create this amazing, intimate couples stay and experience, 2-person unit, it gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of what we can do, how high it can be, the features it can have, things like that. And I mean, we've also found that at least right now, going after couples and kind of these smaller intimate stays are one of the easiest things to have go viral on social media. Like we have the most success with targeting couples retreat, romantic treehouse getaway in Fredericksburg or whatever it may be. And we put that up front and center. It's like the first caption you see, and they do extremely well. And I don't know if that's because boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife are sharing it with each other, so that creates more shares and it kind of pushes it. We don't know exactly why that is. I think that some of it I think has to do with the connection you feel to a space when you're envisioning one other person going with you and the, connection and experience that you're going to have with that one other person. I think it's a more intimate, deeply connected experience that you have with that piece of content or with that, structure that you want to stay at.
I misspoke earlier and said cost per square footage. But do you think your cost per square footage is directly correlated to your revenue per square footage? Or do you think that there's some variability in trying to lower your cost per square footage and maximizing your revenue per square footage?
Yeah, I think that there's things that you can do to lower cost per square footage. I mean, you could always spend more, right? And we don't have unlimited budgets, so we're having to make choices around, where are we going to spend the extra money? What's going to move the needle?
Let's dive into some of that.
Sure.
Because I think that's important for people to know what does move the needle on. You only have a finite amount of money that you can spend. What do you spend the money on?
So definitely want to spend more money on and sort of splurge on the things that people like look, feel, touch, directly. So we want to spend sufficient amount of money, and we want to make sure we have good systems for things like horizontal construction, septic, water, electric, things like that. But having the Rolls Royce of those types of systems doesn't necessarily move the needle in terms of customer, as long as we have a good enough system that works. Now, when it comes to tile and siding and furniture and things that the guest is going to, architecture and design, right? You see that's a big piece of it. So it's really leaning into and investing in the areas that are closest to the customer.
I like that. We found, are there certain things that you don't go super expensive on that constantly need to be replaced?
It's like things that we skimp out on that we constantly have to spend more money replacing. Is that?
That you already have to replace a bunch, that you're like, look, we're going to have to replace this every 2 months, that we're just not going to buy the Rolls Royce of.
Man, I don't think there's anything that we have to replace that frequently.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Paper towels. We buy the cheapest paper towel. Now we have nice toilet paper, and I think that's different.
Yeah.
Like, I understand people want nice toilet paper. Paper towels, we buy the 76 cents per roll at Walmart paper towels.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We definitely don't go overboard on the paper towel spend. That's for sure. I think that's a decent example. I don't think we buy the like cheapest of anything. I don't think we do that with anything. And some of that comes down to our price point, the tier that we're at. People expect a certain standard of everything, including paper towels. And I think people probably, at least, like, if you're actually talking about the cheapest paper towels possible, like, I know the difference between that and a roll of Bounty. And not to say that we're going to get all Bounty, but I think you do know the difference as somebody paying $700 or $800 a night. So yeah, we don't go that cheap on anything, but there's certainly things that we spend more on than others.
What do you prioritize?
Yeah, I would say we spent quite a bit of money on tile. I think having a beautiful tile that pops can really, turn your space from like a run of the mill, same basic white subway tile everyone's doing, to something that's that much more unique, differentiated, Instagrammable in terms of the interior space. We spend quite a lot on our exterior wood siding. It's definitely an area that we invest quite heavily in. Not to say that we're going to do all wood siding forever, but when we do wood siding, we use a thermally modified wood product that actually gets treated in a kiln, and it extracts more of the moisture out of it, so it lasts longer, and it keeps its color and aesthetic longer. And it's one of the first things you see when you walk up to the unit. It's one of the things you see on Instagram when you're looking at our unit. So the exterior siding is very important. It's one of the first impressions, right?
For the deck or for the actual building?
Both. We spend quite a bit on both. We have shifted our decks to we are going to be doing a composite decking material, which I was not thrilled about doing. But we have hot tubs connected to all of our decks, and there's so much water damage that, and I will say that like the composite decking material now, like some of it is like so good and looks so nice and feels so nice that I got comfortable with it. And it just lasts so much better with all the water, sort of penetration and pooling and stuff that we get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good bit. There is a part in there that I want to just clarify for everyone, is that what I think you've done extremely well is that you focused on experience first, because expensive tile doesn't mean anything if you don't have the experience before that.
Yeah.
And so I think that the forefront has to be the uniqueness, the one of one, plus the experience being built out first. If you were going to choose a hot tub or nice tile, which one would you choose?
I would choose a hot tub. Yes, for sure. And I think that investing in those amenities to create that experience is super important. And thinking about, does the space feel good when I'm here? Right? Does it feel calming? Does it feel like a space where I can have a romantic getaway? And I think the little things do matter when it comes to that. The poles, the fixtures, the tile, all that stuff matters. But of course, we want to make sure that you have all the amenities that you need as a guest. And we're always thinking about the experience. How can we make it better? And how can we make it more shareable so that more people can find it and stay with us?
All right, next I want to talk about your communal experiences. So the pool, the sauna, that whole build out. Really from one, I want to know how has it been from a guest side? And then how has it been from an operations side? Because it's sunk costs. You're not charging a nightly rate for those communal experiences, but it is a part of the package. So I want to hear from the guest side how they've liked it, disliked it, and then from a management side of it, has it been paid off? Does it pay off well, and then the upkeep of it, because you're not obviously charging for it? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think our communal area is one of the things that attracts guests to Onera. One of the primary things. Certainly our highest end, most unique units, like they want to stay in Monarch or they want to stay in Spyglass. But our communal area is super cool. It's elevated. There's like a walkway through the trees back to a hammock area that's elevated, and some like swinging chair and bench area. And then we have the pools and the hot tubs and barrel sauna. So there's a lot going on over there, and guests love it. We know they love it also because it was just down, and the amount of refund requests and cancellations and all the rest when we told people that it was going to be down was overwhelming. So we knew that it definitely adds a lot of value on that front. And I will tell you, one of our best months to date was last July. We just obliterated our projections. It was our best revenue month ever. And July in Central Texas is hot. And I will tell you that the reason I believe that we performed so well is because of our pool and communal amenity area. So I do think it comes through in the revenue. It's not just about the customer experience, but again, like it's all related. If we nail the customer experience, it's always going to show through in the revenue, as long as we have good revenue management and pricing and all that, which I think we're really good at as well. So totally worth it. And we're leaning into doing more of that. So at Owasso Hill Country, my next development, we're going to have more communal amenities. It's going to be our first site that's going to have food and beverage. So we're going to have a cafe restaurant there. We will have a subterranean spa and gym that's, kind of tucked underneath a waterfall of the communal pool grotto area. So we're going to have a bigger event space, a 200-person event space, some conference room capability as well. So we're really leaning into all the amenities and sort of add-ons that you could want, whether you are a couple or you are a small group or if you're a big group.
I want to get into financing and how you were able to finance basically this project. You raised money before you bought the land. How was that? How was the process of raising money, and then how much money did you raise?
For Onera, Fredericksburg, it's first property.
Well, you started a real estate fund, right?
So initially for Onera, Fredericksburg, I just called up the clients of my short-term rental management company and was like, hey, I want to build this treehouse resort, luxury glamping getaway in Fredericksburg. It's a great market, take a look. And we think these units can do over $100K each. And they're doing well over that. And everyone was like, you made me money on the short-term rentals, count me in for $100K, $200K, whatever. So that.
Wait. Did you have renderings or anything?
We had photos and mood board images. I mean, it was nothing compared to what we're doing now.
I love this. So you just went to the people that you made money, which is a great strategy, and said, I have this idea. Do you have an idea of how much you wanted to raise?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had it budgeted out and all the rest. I mean, that budget was a joke and ended up not being reality. And I've learned a lot about budgeting since then. Thankfully, it was a small project, so we went over budget. It was also during COVID, like supply source shortages, labor shortages. We ordered a bunch of stuff from China. There was the Suez Canal debacle at that time. Like, it was a nightmare. But it was a smaller project, so we were able to raise some bridge debt, bring in some new equity. And so we were able to get the project done and complete something beautiful. I've learned a lot about budgeting and timelines and all the rest. And we come in at or under budget. We come in and we meet our timelines. And my GC that I now work with is a massive reason behind all that.
First build, you raised capital. You came in about what you wanted to spend. Or you said that you spent a little bit more money than you wanted to spend.
Yes.
But it's paid back from the time. So then I want to get into how you funded that Fredericksburg with that money that you raised, or with debt, or a combination.
Yeah. So Onera Fredericksburg was that kind of friends and family, guys that I had made money was the equity. And we raised debt from a local community bank. I said that loan officer who bought into the concept and, wanted to see it come to life and really believed in us. So, and we had an operating business that was able to guarantor the loan as well. So like my short-term rental management company helped secure that financing. So that was the initial. We then, actually before Onera Fredericksburg opened, we raised a small real estate fund, which became the equity in Onera Wimberley, our second location, which I actually bought land for before we opened Onera Fredericksburg. So that was a leap of faith. But as I told you before, I had actually wanted to build in Wimberley before Fredericksburg. We just found the land here first. So when I had been looking for a year and then saw these views that just blew me away at the Wimberley property, I knew, like, we can't wait. We have to act on this now, because I don't know the next time this property is going to come around. So we bought that land in the first piece of property we bought in May of 2021. We didn't open Onera Fredericksburg until November of 2021.
So that was funded through the real estate fund.
That was funded through the real estate fund.
So you had this initial investment of these core guys.
Yep.
They fund Fredericksburg.
Yep.
As you're building Fredericksburg, you start a fund that then raises capital for Wimberley and Spirit Sophia. And
our hotel in Palm Springs, correct. Spirit of Sophia. And then we rolled Onera Fredericksburg into that fund as well. So we paid those initial investors a high interest rate for coming in early type thing. And then we rolled their investment into the fund. And so the fund basically is three assets: Onera Fredericksburg phase 1, Onera Wimberley, and the Palm Springs Hotel, Spirit of Sophia, that we renovated.
And then Spirit of Sophia, Fredericksburg's up. Wimberley is all paid for through the fund, or you have debt on it as well?
We have quite a bit of debt on Wimberley. Yeah. So it's like I said, over a $20 million project, and we only have about 10% debt, 10% equity into it. So the majority of it's debt.
And then through the same credit union guy?
So no, actually, we thought the same bank was going to finance that property. And then the debt crisis happened, and they hit allocation, and it was yes, we're going to do it. And then final hour, June of 2022, they said, oh, sorry, we can't finance the property. So the project. So that was a massive blow. And I spent the next, 3 to 4 months trying to find a new bank that was going to finance during the debt crisis. So it was kind of a nightmare. Thankfully, we were already in deep talks with the REIT, the Real Estate Investment Trust, the public company that invests in real estate, that bought out a 90% interest in Onera Fredericksburg, and also, wanted to buy Wimberley once it was built and then expand Onera Fredericksburg. So they saw this as a bigger play than just this one, 11 unit property. And so they provided what's called mezzanine debt, junior debt, to the senior financing with the bank that allowed us to get to that 90% loan to cost or loan to value.
I want to talk about the sale to the REIT.
Sure.
How first off, you sold it for 7 million, 90%, 6.3.
Correct.
2 questions here. First, I want to 6.3 just gets wired to your bank account?
The debt has to get paid off too. So the bank steps in and they
go, we're gonna
they get paid off, and then we get the difference. Yeah.
Was it a pretty surreal feeling was that the largest sum of money that has hit your personal bank account?
And it was not my personal bank account. It was the fund's bank account.
Okay.
But yes, it was the most money that I'd seen moved into any of my company's bank accounts in a single day. Yeah.
What's that feeling?
Man, it was definitely a mix of, I mean, look, there was a little bit of relief in there. We had taken a big swing and a big risk with this property. We'd gone in over budget due to COVID largely. And the property was performing, but yeah, I mean, having that hit the account was certainly validation for what we're doing. There's one other piece around the structure that I should mention. So it wasn't like, oh, we're all done sort of making the millions on Onera Fredericksburg. The way it was structured was with an earnout. So we have to perform for the next year basically and maintain our projected NOI, our income, in order to maximize the earnout and maximize the price, hit that 7 million, which was that 7 million valuation was the max. So they kind of capped like, okay, this is the max you can hit. This is our max selling price. But if your NOI goes significantly down, then, we have the ability to pay less for it if it's not producing. And thankfully we blew through the max and we beat our budgeted NOI targets and we got the full second tranche about 10 months later. So thank you. Yeah. So that was the kind of second moment of all the debt was paid off and another sort of, over $1 million hit our account in a day. So, yeah, it was exciting. It was cool and definitely a proof point to be able to continue to grow and scale and do more properties like this. To
finish off Fredericksburg, I want to talk about the expansion. Your expansion of Fredericksburg is happening on the lot right next to it. And it's an extra 23 keys.
Correct.
What type of structures are those?
All different.
Really?
Yeah. So
something we haven't seen in phase one?
There are no duplicates. Yeah. So we felt like we really needed to lean into this eclectic, bespoke kind of custom unit thing because, all the units on Onera Fredericksburg are different. I mean, the 3 smaller container units are basically the same, but all the other ones are very unique. And to then go on phase 2 and build all the same unit type just didn't feel like it did service to what this property is and what Onera Fredericksburg is. So yeah, we designed some amazing new unit types, everything from an iteration on Monarch. So it's called Diamond and it's effectively like, 2 diamond shaped structures that are slightly offset connected with, instead of having a stone tub like we do here that's tucked underneath the unit on the ground, we brought the hot tub up to the deck level, elevated so that you can walk right out your door and go into the hot tub. By the way, that was a mistake that we made with Monarch that, we're iterating and trying to improve on the next type of unit. And that diamond unit, also the reason we designed it the way we did is so you could have this amazing interior shoot through moment, which we didn't get in Monarch. So you can walk into the front door and get this hero shot from front to back of unit, capture the hot tub. And by the way, we get that shot in Spyglass. The Spyglass unit at Onera Fredericksburg, we have that shot. And so at Diamond, the iteration on Monarch, we're going to get that shot and we're going to get an amazing exterior shot of the unit.
I love your thought process behind designing a product that allows you to not only fulfill the amenities and things you need for your guests, but also from a marketing standpoint of how you shoot a property in order to showcase it through socials, which brings us to our next talking point of Stay at Wasi.
The one other thing I want to say on that front is, yes, it is for social, but it's also for our guests because they want to shoot it, right? They want to take photos and videos and then they want to share it. And let's make their lives easier to capture this amazing content.
I love the concept of being able to not only design something for yourself that you can market right on social, so that when you take a photo of the interior / exterior, it photographs correctly, but also designing that so that the guests can shoot it. And I think that there's something special there. What do you think about when you're designing a property so that the guests can shoot it as well?
look, if my photographer and videographer says it's hard to shoot, it's going to be damn hard to shoot for a guest, right? So it does come back to the content creators, the professionals giving us feedback on what would be better in terms of how to design the space and in terms of getting good content and just making it easier to shoot. So if it's easier to shoot for them, it becomes feasible to shoot well for the guest. So that's where we're getting a lot of feedback. It's hard to get feedback from a guest, like what would be easier to shoot, but from a professional, it's easier to get that feedback.
Do you do anything for the guest on showing them like where to shoot or how to shoot, or is there anything that plays into that?
Instagram, right? Most of them find us on Instagram. So they kind of see the shot because we've shown it to them in our reels, right? We've kind of shown to them, these are the best shots you can get of this unit from various angles through our content.
Let's dive into that. You have a management company called Stay Owasi.
Yep. Owasi.
Owasi?
Yeah, Owasi. Yeah, just drop the stay. Owasi.
Just Owasi.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah,
you have a management company called Owasi.
Yep.
That does not only the guest communication, the management, price optimization, all of that back end business stuff, but also the marketing arm of Owasi. And I think that it really shows in your content just the level of it. And I think that you mentioned the last podcast, which I want to dive into, is that you went from 0% direct bookings to 70% direct bookings.
88 last month.
Ben,
yeah.
Incredible, man.
Amazing.
Incredible. What do you attribute that to?
Going all in on content, social media, digital marketing. I mean, just going all in, really. And when we first opened, we were only on Airbnb. And that was everything I knew. I had a short-term rental management business. We were not booking through Instagram. Our product wasn't worthy of booking through Instagram, right? And then we had built this product that was, but I didn't know anything about it. So it was actually our first influencer that was kind of harassing us on Airbnb, basically. Hey, let me come out and do a collab with you guys. And
you mentioned this last time, but you never gave us a name. Can we know a name?
Yeah, of course. I thought I did. Sorry. So Texas Explorer, Amanda, she's amazing. She's done such incredible collabs with us, generated tens of thousands of dollars in bookings, is worth her weight in gold, and has, led to an amazing follower growth for us every time she comes out. And she helped me with some of the initial setup and learning some tricks of the trade when I was super early. And to be honest, in that first year, 2022, our first full year, I was doing it all myself, the Instagram. So obviously we had some photos and some collateral, but we were just posting photos, doing carousels. We weren't even really doing reels, and we were relying on influencers to help build the following and generate direct bookings. So when Amanda came out the first time, it was a comp stay, and she got a bunch of content, and she did one post, and we did $10,000 to $15,000 in direct bookings from that one post. And then she had another account that she was getting off the ground. She came back and did a post for that account, and we did the same results, $10,000 to $15,000 in direct bookings. Had just spun up a direct booking site that was kind of janky, not great, and we were doing those kind of numbers. So with just me sort of managing it on the side, 20, 30 minutes a week, only handling inbound influencers and referrals from influencers I had, we did 30% direct in that first year, kind of doing it on the side. And I was like, man, we were pricing the same as Airbnb. So we were scooping 12 to 14% off the top. So the total fees of Airbnb is roughly 17% between guest and host now. We got to pay payment
3% to the host, or taken away from the host, and then around 14 to the guest.
But from the guest perspective, they're paying one number. So, I mean, it's effectively a 17% fee, right? So if we price the same on our website, we're scooping close to 14%. We got to pay 3% payment processing either way, but we're getting all that margin, which is another reason that our properties are some of the highest margin in certainly the hotel space or the multi-unit STR space, because we're capturing all that margin. And it allows us to invest more in the units. So it all goes back to the customer, right? We have that higher NOI, so we can make more amazing units and invest more heavily in them to create a better customer experience. So we had Amanda come. We did amazingly well. We did 30% in that first year of kind of barely trying. And then in year 2, I tried to hire an agency, and we went from 15,000 followers to ho hum 18,000 followers in like 4 months. I mean, really did not move the needle much at all. And that's when I decided, okay, I can't outsource my problems. I have to build this in-house. It's such a core, important part of the business. And we built out a content and digital marketing team in-house. So we have full-time shooter that will go to various places in his van and stay for multiple days at a time and get a ton of content. We have editors, copywriters. My co-founder, Jesse, is the head of, content and digital marketing, as well as just revenue management more broadly. And we're constantly growing that team. So it's something we're all in on. And then in that second year, we got up to 70% direct. That was 2023. And now, I mean, we did 83%, I think in March, and 83% in February direct and 88% in March. And April is on track to be in the high 80s as well.
High level marketing strategy would just be growing Instagram. And are you on TikTok, or like what social media platforms do you find the highest ROI on?
Yeah, we are focusing exclusively on Instagram for now. And what we've heard and kind of what we've seen is that the Instagram followers are more valuable, right, per follower, and are leading more to bookings for us than potentially TikTok. I'm interested in TikTok. I've been pushing the team to kind of explore it, but there's so much that we still have to do to continue to optimize and perfect Instagram. That's where we're focused on right now. So it's really, I guess you'd say twofold. So one piece is the influencers. The influencers, you want influencers that have a targeted, engaged following. So we're targeting engagement rates 5% plus, and people that are either in travel or in some cases foodies, which have a nice kind of crossover to hospitality. So we need targeted and engaged. That helps grow the following. And then the thing that we've gotten a lot better at is producing our own super high quality, engaging content. So we have shooters come out regularly. We get a ton of content here, and we edit those into short form video, and we create these compelling reels, and we continue to get better at that. So, early on we were kind of messing around, seeing what works, and we're always continuing to test to see what works. One of the things we've stumbled upon recently, which is so obvious, which very few people actually do, up front and center in the first clip, and when they see the thumbnail, it has to say something that's going to grab their attention and let them know that it's for them. So like couples retreat, Wimberley, Texas, or, romantic treehouse getaway, Fredericksburg, Texas, something that when they're scrolling, they say, oh, that's for me. I could actually stay there, or this is something I should pay attention to. And so many people miss the mark on that. And then throughout the video, obviously having trending audio and cutting up the clips so it syncs well with the audio and has a nice flow. But then for each clip, we have another caption that helps pull the viewer back in, that keeps them kind of hooked throughout. And there's other little things too that we've stumbled upon. For example, when you're looking at something relatively mundane and less exciting, you can do things with like shooting in a kind of frenetic manner that kind of keeps it still somewhat engaging. And then when you get to the hero shot, that's when you pause and go slower, right? You probably know this from video. So that hero shot, you want to focus on it and kind of give it all its glory. So these are some of the things that we found that we're implementing in our content. And not only for our properties, we also do third-party social media marketing and digital marketing more broadly. And we've been working on this account. It's a 3-unit glamping resort in Wimberley, actually very close to where Onera Wimberley is going to be. We're friends with the owners.
Spoon Mountain?
Spoon Mountain, yes.
I'm doing a podcast with them in 2 days.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You said, I forgot that you were going to see them. Amazing people. Love Kennedy Vet. They're just wonderful folks. So we've been working for them for a bit now. In the past 60 days, we have just been killing it for them on the social media front. They went from 30,000 followers to now they're at like 65,000 followers in like less than 2 months. And all of our content for them now is hitting. We had a 4 million view video, a 1.2 million view video, a bunch in the high hundreds of thousands. And it's all kind of using the strategies that I've been describing to you. And so we feel like in some senses we've cracked the code and we're just kind of leaning into that. We are also now developing our meta ads capability, and we're using content that works, that we know is proven high engagement, a high number of views, and we're repurposing that into ads.
We talked last time that you weren't running ads yet, but you were thinking about possibly doing it. That strategy is, we do the same thing. Post organic content, whatever blows up on organic, run as an ad because it's already tested as successful, and then it'll just already increase. Are you doing, when you run ads, are you doing people visiting, searching Fredericksburg? Or are you doing targeting Austin? How do you know kind of the back end of how you're running your ads right now?
I'm not going to get too into the weeds on that front because we are testing right now, and we have, our internal team is kind of getting up to speed on that front. But the answer is that we're testing a bunch of different targeting strategies and audiences we want to go after with, various forms of content. But the main focus is on meta ads, and then we're doing some like branded search as well for Google, just because there was a point in time when we were doing so little that there was other glamping sites in the area that were buying Onera keywords. And so they would show up as the sponsored links. So we had to at least kind of, make sure we were buying up enough that we were showing up first, which we are. And our branded search doesn't cost a lot, right?
Yeah.
But it's still important when people look us up, they find us and not like, Camp Hideaway or whatever the other place is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about branding and the importance of creating a brand. When you're creating one of these properties, what is the value in creating not just the property, but the social identity as well, which could be argued as a brand, right? So you have Onera, but then you have Onera Digital. And I think that there is a tremendous amount of value in the digital aspect of Onera. I'm guessing you would obviously recommend people starting that digital platform, but how important do you actually think it is to the property itself?
So if you're going to build something one of one that's highly shareable and experiential, it's a massive disservice to yourself to not build a brand. If you're doing something commodity product, like let's say a Sonder or Domio or some of these like apart hotel companies, I think you're going to massively struggle to build a brand that people care about. But if you have a unique angle and product and story, then you need to build a brand. You're going to drive all these bookings direct. You're going to own the customer. They're going to love, not only the brand, but also you as a founder and the team. And that's kind of the direction I want to take this, because I do think that branding is changing, and that people and guests and customers, they love people. In some cases, they like brands and they despise businesses. So if you look at like a, Brian Chesky or a Tim Cook or, any of these guys, Elon Musk, right? Their personal followings are orders of magnitude bigger than their brand's followings. And when they, tweet something or put something out there, it gets so much more engagement than when the brand does or the business does, God forbid. And that's something you can do as a small time operator, and this whole concept of building in public is something that I'm really leaning into now, as much as ever. And it's not something that I did in the past. When I built Onera, I wasn't filming everything and sharing it with the world. I wish I did, but I'm trying to do that with future projects.
Every founder says that. Every founder who's done anything was like, oh yeah, I wish I filmed because everyone wishes that they have video vlogs of Jeff Bezos in his little office of Amazon, right? Everyone wishes they had Elon Musk at PayPal and hearing how they think at that moment. What do you think the biggest hurdle that you had to learn or overcome from not shooting any content to now diving more into the personal brand?
What's the biggest thing that I had to learn?
Or overcome, maybe.
Yeah.
Was there a limiting belief that you had on...
Yeah, do people care? Yeah, I mean, I think that's most of what we all go through before kind of putting ourselves out there on social media. I mean, I don't know if people care about me or my story or my property. And the surprising thing is that that's kind of ridiculous looking back on it, that to think that people wouldn't care about how to build a treehouse resort, out here. I think it's a pretty interesting topic. But even outside of that, like just doing maybe more commodity Airbnbs, but trying to scale that business. Like a lot of people have found success on social media showing under the hood of even less sexy businesses than that. So I think the clear answer is that people do care. They want to connect with you as the founder. They want to see the challenges, the struggles, the overcoming that. And they want authenticity too. I think that's another big piece of it as well. Being authentic with your audience, being, consistent and kind of congruent, right? Between who you are, what your property is, how you are in a podcast, what your sort of written content is on let's say LinkedIn and Twitter. So, I think that it is getting comfortable, putting it all out there and recognizing that it's adding value for people, right? I'm actually, like I said, being in service of my team. I'm hopefully being in service of young hospitality entrepreneurs out there that want to innovate and build product for the modern traveler. And if you listen to like a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos or some of these guys, Jeff Bezos in particular talks about that they are just laser focused on customer and customer experience at Amazon and always have been. And that there's other businesses that are more like competitive or competitor focused. And they're always trying to like take the best things from competitors and or to sort of always benchmark themselves against competitors. And I mentioned Isaac French before. I know a number of other like competitors, I guess you would say, in this unique stays, experiential hospitality space. And like, we're all friends. There's more than enough to go around. There is so much demand for this product and so little supply that like I'm only interested in helping the next person that actually wants to deliver a cool experience and wants to do something cool and actually take a swing. I'm not interested in somebody that's like, oh, I'm trying to ride the trend and the fad of glamping and throw up a bunch of tents on the cheap and make a buck. But somebody that really wants to deliver an amazing one-of-a-kind experience, I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
I also think that there's a lot of people have that limiting belief of that the world is limited in the sense of if you buy a chair, that person's demand for a chair goes away. Where what we're offering is nights. And if someone has a good experience in one night of your property, they can spend the next night or in a week at another property. And actually you doing well and having a property that is a great experience is only going to make that traveler want to do more experiences. So how I see it is it's not like buying a chair. When you buy a chair, your desire of needing another chair goes away, but it's rather being exponentially increased if you do a good job.
You're introducing them to what's possible. I mean, that's what hotels for so long have been heads in beds. And we and other people in the space are showing guests what they should come to expect and what they should look for, and that this is available to them. And I do think there's opportunities here too. Like when it comes to a soft brand, I'm actually, Onera is a founding member of Nook, which is an outdoor hospitality soft brand. And I think there's incredible value in like you stay at Onera, and then when you're in Washington, maybe you don't know about Devin Lorup's Pacific Bin, or when you're, closer to Waco, you don't know about Isaac French's Live Oak Lake. And if, you are familiar with this soft brand that can connect you to these one-of-a-kind experiential stays, you know where to look to find this stuff. So I think there's something there, but I totally agree with you. And even within a market, I'm not worried about it. Like within Wimberley or within Fredericksburg, if somebody's doing it to a high standard, because I think it makes that market more attractive, right? If Fredericksburg becomes this unique stays hotbed, then it's going to drive more people to come here, and it's going to be a more noteworthy destination because we are the cutting edge of hospitality. I think a perfect example of that is Alula in Saudi Arabia, which was like a neglected desert, right? That had basically no tourism. And Saudi Arabia is investing billions and billions into tourism. And Alula has a banyan tree and a habitas that are like incredible, like, world-class, super unique, differentiated. They have, light up trampolines in the desert and these like pools built into like carved rock formations. I mean, it's out of this world. And, that drives more traffic to the area, right? And it drives more intrigue and tourism to Alula. So the same can hold true for a market in the US.
I love that vision of where the industry is going. I think that's important. I have had the beautiful opportunity to hang out with some of your dream team when it comes to Iris or Lulu, one of your cleaners, Maria. You have cultivated such a phenomenal team around you. I guess and we talked a little bit about your dream team in the past episode. My one question is, how do you source? How do you inspire these A players, and how do you find them? And then how do you convince them that you're the person to get behind and lead them?
So I think social media has opened up a whole new world for us on that front. We get a lot of inbound of people that want to work for us. And, at the corporate level at Owasi, we have about a dozen people. Half of those are content, marketing side of things, and revenue management. And then the other side is more ops, guest communications in the Philippines. Tom, that my chief of staff, that's kind of like my number 2 and helps take off 80% of the things off my plate that used to bog down my time so I can focus on vision and growth. And almost all of our hires have come through social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, or network, have really been the way that we've found A players. And, we have a robust hiring process. It is not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, we have a numerical reasoning test, even for our guest comms people, because they're doing a bit of data entry. There's multiple rounds of interviews. They have to send us a Loom and answer a few questions when starting out. So there's multiple steps to determine if somebody's like serious and committed and, knows how to follow directions and some basic things like that. But being willing to be patient on a hire has been something that I've had to learn to do, right? There's this impulse to, we have a hole, we got to fill it. And if you fill it with a B or a C player, you're demotivating the other A players, and you're just going to have to unwind it later if you want to level up your team. So I've had scenarios where, we've had a B or a C player in the room, and I was afraid of losing them for fear of having to replace them. Maybe they were a manager level, whatever. And it's always proven out that by removing them, it's been addition by subtraction, because the A players are that much more motivated. Somebody who is A player rises to the occasion, and they kind of take their role, let's say maybe as the manager. So that's something I've had to learn. And then you hear it a million times, and we really now embody it. And that is the whole idea of hire slow, fire fast. I mean, we've had to fire people on day one, and I'm not proud of that, but they interviewed well. And, it seemed like they were a great fit. And then on day one, true self comes out a little bit more, and it's clear that they're like in it for them and not in it for the team. And you got to just rip the Band-Aid off right away and start over. So, I think it's just that commitment to A players. And again, it's in service of the team, because if you have somebody that's not a high performer, then somebody's got to pick up their slack. And nobody wants to do that, and it's demotivating. So that's how we think about hiring. I will say at the property level, it's harder than the corporate level. And we've had to have some come to Jesus moments around like what we got to pay to get good people. So we have significantly increased salaries. And the idea at this point is we still want to be very efficient about our staffing, and not have too many staff, because we don't need a front desk. We think it actually takes away from the experience. We don't need daily housekeeping. We don't need an on-site concierge. There's a lot of things we don't need, but the people we do have need to be exceptional. And to get exceptional people, you need to pay them right. You need to treat them right. They need to be enrolled in the vision and care about the customer and the vision. And we're now building on-site housing as well, so we can pull from a broader pool and give people a nice place to stay, in addition to a very competitive salary. So we're all in on people and how do we recruit and keep the best.
So I'm really curious about what you've learned in Fredericksburg phase 1 and what you're now taking, I guess the top 3 things that you're taking to not only phase 2, but also to Wimberley and Owasi Hillside? What?
Owasi Hill Country. Yeah, that's
Owasi Hill Country.
Our next project. Yeah. So with Wimberley, it was, how do we get even more dramatic views and landscape and have that wow moment, not just with the unit, but also as you're looking out at this dramatic hill country view. And really it was, as we've talked about, designing units for Instagram and therefore designing units for guest shareability. So they want to take videos and photos and share them with the world even more than they're doing now. So really trying to optimize for that. So we did that with the unit types that we selected. They're great to shoot from both interior and exterior. We're doing green roofs on the greenhouse units, which line the front of the hillside, which is going to allow for amazing drone footage, right? As well as these shots where you're from your deck's unit and you're overlooking all of these native grass, green roofs with wildflowers kind of, rolling off into the sunset, if you will. So, that I'd say that's one area. Another one with Awasi Hill Country is catering more to groups as opposed to just couples. I think there's massive demand for corporate retreats, wellness retreats, industry conferences that are maybe tighter knit in more of an inspiring environment, weddings. There's tons of demand for, the type of product like Onera, but more catered to groups. And there's just so little supply. I mean, there's almost nothing. So we want to have that capability at Awasi, and we do have it to some extent at Wimberley as well. There is an event space that's beautiful, floor to ceiling glass windows. It's smaller, so it is sub 100 people, but facing the amazing views and will be awesome for, more intimate weddings and executive retreats and things like that. I'd say those are probably the two main ones. There's little things like elevate all the hot tubs and make them easily accessible from, the sliding door of the unit. Don't use sliding doors as your main entry way to the unit because they're an absolute bear to get good Wi-Fi enabled, code locks and good locking systems to work. So we have swing doors, you walk through the unit, and then there's sliding doors, out the back onto the deck. So little things like that.
Your second forms of egress are sliding doors, but your first one have deadbolts that can be
exactly, yeah,
Yale and Schlanger locks.
Correct. Yeah. So there's little things like that we've learned from some of our mistakes on Onera Fredericksburg. And I think I mentioned this before too, but we're only going after like the upper end of tier 1 units. We're not doing any tier 2 or even like the lower end of tier 1 units. And that's largely because there's a lot of supply coming out there of mid-tier glamping and kind of, maybe even mid-tier landscape hotel type products or short-term rentals. So the most demand is for the upper end that's not being met. So that's where we want to play.
The next question is one of my favorite questions. It's the hills that we die on. And are there any things that the guest request that you guys, that the guest request to add that you guys just refuse to not add? I'll give you an example. Our property, TVs. We don't have TVs. We don't want TVs because of the lack of light pollution. There are zero, like the stars are just incredible at night, and the whole area is lit up by the moon and the stars, and it's spectacular. And we want people to look at that and not at a TV and put their phones away and get away from all of that world. So that's a hill that we die on, and we get requests a bunch saying, oh, we would love a TV, and it's a firm no for us. Are there any hills that you die on?
I'm surprised that you guys get that request a lot. So interestingly, it's something that we decided not to do. So we don't have TVs either. And we thought, and actually the REIT, our owners thought that we'd get a lot of complaints. We get virtually zero complaints about not having TVs. So we think we made the right call there. And we're not in a rush to add them at all. It's always like, where do you put the TV? How do you make it look good? Obviously you're disconnecting from nature at that point. And today, if you want to watch a movie, you're going to use your laptop or a tablet or something like that, So I would say that we're very curious about the customer. So I don't want to say that we think we know in terms of if we're getting repetitive feedback from a guest around a certain area, we're going to look at that and try to improve. So I can't think of an example actually where a guest or like, many guests have hammered us on one thing that we think is like very bad for the experience. That hasn't really come up. And yeah, we try to be as collaborative with our guests as possible. So we want to understand their needs. Maybe they think that one solution is what they want and need, and we come up with another solution that we think still addresses the need, but is better for the product as a whole. I have one example. We have struggled with pets. And that's one that we definitely do get a request of quite a bit. We certainly, we have to allow service animals and we're happy to, and we wish that we could allow pets more broadly. But we've had, unfortunately, some pet owners that have left their pets unattended. And in some of the soft-sided units, for example, dog howling all day, and it impacts the experience of another unit. And so then we're in a tough spot where it's like we're hurting somebody else's experience because you were an irresponsible pet owner. So that's been one that we don't have a great solution for yet. So if you or anyone else, we'd love to, allow pets. I have a dog that I love. So do all my partners. So yeah, we'd love to figure that one out, but we haven't yet.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
It's a tricky conundrum there, because I get the aspect of we get tons of pets and we allow pets, but our units are not like where everyone has their own acre. So even if they were howling, you wouldn't really hear them. But you definitely, I understand the problems with impacting other guests, and that's it becoming a problem when you're starting to impact other guests. I don't have a solution for you.
Yeah. Someday we'll figure it out.
So the last part of what I wanted to kind of chat with you about was, in the last episode, I asked you your why. And I asked you, was there a moment that solidified why you're doing what you're doing? And you explained that on your honeymoon, you traveled with your wife and you just had that feeling, and that you wanted to create that feeling.
Yeah.
What do you think that feeling, how do you elevate that feeling? How do you create that feeling? What is that feeling? And how do you expand and make it better?
So I think it relates to a lot of what we talked about around the modern traveler. So it is more inspirational, more shareable, more emotionally connected to the property and like to me and the team. It is collaborating with the guest versus it feeling like a transaction. And it's eliminating as much friction as possible to their experience. We want them in the flow, in that perfect moment, and nothing to pull them out of that. So if everything's easy to use, available to them to a certain standard, we can keep them in that flow state. So I think that's a big piece of it. Another big piece of my why, which I think relates to creating the moments of perfection that you were kind of alluding to, is it is innovating hospitality and sort of like creating the future of travel that I think is so desperately needed for the modern traveler, but is just not available. Like we talked about this a lot with supply. Like there's so little supply of landscape hotels, experiential boutique hotels, unique Airbnbs, versus the amount of, people that fit into that modern traveler segment. It's like, how do we create those spaces for those people? I think it's a massive need that we're trying to address, both with our own properties as well as with, all the content we're putting out on social media coming from me, Twitter and LinkedIn, trying to educate more people about unique stays and experiential hospitality so that hopefully more people can build them and create them.
The whole mission of this podcast is to inspire entrepreneurs to create more unique experiences so that their guests can create more lifelong memories with their loved ones.
Love it.
So it's really,
very in line.
I think we need more entrepreneurs taking these risks and building out these properties because of what it does for the people that are staying at the properties. We just had our third engagement last night at our property in Arizona, and just seeing photos and videos of people being proposed to is just, I'm sure you get tons and tons of that here.
We get quite a lot. Proposals, engagement photos, honeymoons, birthdays, anniversaries, all of that. Yes.
Well, Ben, you have done a phenomenal job at building this property. I'm so excited to see Wimberley, and your next one after that is going to be incredible. Thank you so much for hosting us, and thanks for being on this podcast.
Thanks for coming out, experiencing Onera, and it was great chatting.